hitting you with the in your face, unedited, straight, blunt talk about sports, finances, relationships, current events, and many other topics along the way. Check out my next episode. What's good, everybody? It's your man, Dom the GM, back with the part 2 of our doubleheader episode today on the True Players podcast. I told you I was going to bring Matthew back from Jacobin Sports Show and the Strickland. So he's back with us. We're going to talk about the Mets opening day. But before we start with the podcast, I want to let everybody know during the podcast I did earlier today, Jadeveon Clowney just signed with the Panthers with a 2-year contract over $24 million. So they just missed out on him, so I guess they're gonna rely on McDonald to fill in the gap that Bryce Huff left for them. So on that note, let's talk about the New York Mets. The opening day has been moved to Friday.
Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring the kiddies, bring the wine. Guaranteed to have it. Yeah, I'm ready for this year, boy.
I'm ready. We're ready. We're definitely mad. Let's introduce yourself to the people, my man.
Matthew Miranda here for the Nightcap. Glad to be here. You can find me writing about the Knicks at the Strickland, the strict.land. Also host the Jacobin Sports Show, which is mostly about intersection of sports, culture, and economics. We'll be celebrating my 100th episode this week. So look out for some special stuff there. If you want to ever look for us on Patreon or on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Jacobin, Jacobin, Jacobin Sports Show. Give it a listen. Check me out.
Definitely. Dead guys, ever give him a listen. He hit you with a lot of great pointers and great aspect dynamics of how you look at things analytically way. And it's always good to listen to him on his article. I had to challenge him last episode. He was trying to challenge about his last article, but we came to an understanding. Like it's okay to disagree. But by the same note, me and him are gonna talk about we are both big fans of New York Mets. Especially with this season. Got a new manager, Carlos Mendoza. Not a big fan of him, but let's see what happens. He may grow on me, like Terry Collins grew on me.
I can't say that I'm excited. But I'm really not anything. I'm just okay. I'll see. And I've been wrong about someone. Mickey Callaway's introductory press conference had me ready to go fight the Crusades for that man. He was so incredible in how he talked and what he said. And he was one of the worst managers I've ever seen in my life. And when Terry Collins was hired, I was like, eh. And I would have killed for Terry Collins by the end of his time there. So who knows? We'll see with Mendoza. Great reputation from players, from other coaches. He's worked at every level. He's bilingual, which is rare with the Mets and very important. And we touched about some of this on a slightly related topic beforehand. I am extremely interested to see how the New York Met fans and media treat a Puerto Rican bilingual manager, because the Mets, since I have been a kid, and I remember it starting with Juan Samuel in the 80s, there is a significant racist portion of the Met fan base that will turn on especially black and brown players who have any kind of, if you remember with the Mets, relievers tend to struggle. That's part of the job. It's normal. But when I think of Met relievers, like John Franco was great. He saved a lot of games, but sometimes he struggled. But did he get treated the way Armando Benitez did when he blew a save?
No.
Or when Mel Rojas blew a save?
Oh,
absolutely not. And Juan Samuel, yeah, he struggled. They wanted to run him out of town. They wanted to run. Well, I'll tell you who they didn't want to run out of town, despite all his struggles. Jason Bay, who might have been the worst signing I've ever seen the Mets make. Nothing personal. Like I said, people struggled. Jason Bay was never booed the way that. So I'll be very, very, very interested to see how Carlos Mendoza is responded to depending on how the team plays, especially.
Got you. Let me add one more player to that list that the New York fans really vilified. A guy who got 51 saves. Named Juris.
Oh, Familia. Yes. Familia, absolutely. I mean, with Familia's a little trickier to me because I'm trying to remember how much of his grief came from. No, you're right. He did, even just as a closer. There was a different energy. Like, if you remember, the Mets had a guy once named Braden Looper as their closer. And, like, white dude, kind of a typical closer, like mostly good numbers, but when he was bad, like, cost him games. That's the nature of being a closer. I don't remember Braden Looper getting crucified.
No.
And remember, Familia had Braden Looper was not here as long as Familia. Familia was a really good pitcher for some good teams for the Mets, or at least early on. And like you're saying, it was just when you said Familia, it almost brought someone else to mind, and I can't. Carlos Baerga. When the Mets traded for Carlos Baerga, again, he struggled. Like, no one's going to deny that Carlos Baerga was a disappointment as a Met player, but there seems to be, I think, oftentimes a pattern where, like, if a white Met struggles, okay, he's trying. And if a black or Spanish-speaking Met struggles, better watch out.
Oh, yeah. Now, do you think that's part of the reason why there's not enough African-American players playing baseball now as it once was, or it's just?
I think there's a lot of factors. I do think that, I don't know if that's the number one reason that more black players aren't coming up into baseball, but I don't think that it's a coincidence that baseball of all the, you take basketball, football, and hockey basketball, football, baseball when we were kids. You played everything. You play all those sports. Everybody played and when you watched games, baseball was pretty diverse. Football was very diverse. Basketball was pretty diverse. I don't think it's coincidental to the culture of baseball as generally a more conservative white game. That I don't think baseball has cared as much to try. They do things, and they're very good to point out, like, oh, we do RBI in the city, and we do blah, blah, blah. We do. But I think it's like, you can't fake that 32 billionaires who are mostly old white men. The fuck do they care? Especially if they can get 10 Dominicans prospects for and that's the biggest thing. I don't think it's even like a conspiracy. I think these people are selfish. And the reality is, if you're a black American player and you are drafted by a team in the American draft, you have certain rights and protections as far as your your contract status, money you owed. If you're a Dominican or a Venezuelan kid and you're drafted in the international draft, you get paid often way less. You have protections, and that's really what it is. The teams don't. It's like every other industry. Where can they find the cheapest labor? And they don't care about the human cost. But I do think there is also an element of, like, they don't miss the black player because they're buying so many cheap Spanish-speaking players instead.
Got you. I was going to mention something else, but when it comes back to me, we'll talk about that later in the podcast. Now let's get to it, because about 15 hours ago, Joe Montgomery's been signed to the Diamondbacks. Nice. Blake Snell was nice pickup for them, and Blake Snell was signed 5 days ago to the Giants. Two pitchers I felt the Mets could have for the contract could have picked up for that 1 year.
I thought, especially when Senga initially, he was gonna miss opening day, and there were already questions coming into the season about, year two, and now Senga's basically your ace, and I think they're going to try to keep him on that same 6 day schedule that he was on last year. But there were already questions about the pitching staff before Senga had his injury issue, and so I thought, like you, again, it's money and it's short. It's a year. Like, you want to pay Blake Snell for a year? Do it. You want to? I do. The only thing I can understand is that, and we could talk about. I don't think the Mets are. I don't think they think this way at every position. But Cohen and David Stearns talked this offseason a lot about wanting to see what they have with some of their young kids, and I think there are some young kids they care about more than others. But this season in particular, the top Met young players seem to be pitchers. Just Christian Scott, and there's some others that, like, we can look at, but, like, it's when reading the quotes and everything, it seems to me like that's probably was a combination of we want to see what the young guys are that we have because of where they are in terms of the so-called Cohen tax. If you sign Snell for $25 million a year, you're really signing him for $50 million. And that's not a problem in terms of can Steve Cohen afford it? No. Is it a problem? Like, would Steve Cohen care? I don't think so at all. But remember, the Dodgers and Yankees spent years just trying to get under that tax once, because if you get under it once, it resets everything. So I think, I would guess that's what they were thinking, but I don't know any Met fan that would have had a problem with them adding Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell, certainly.
Got you.
And if you're in a situation like you were last year and it's a 1-year deal, if you're contending, great, you've got an ace. But if it's July and you're not contending, you've got a guy every team out there is going to want to trade for and rent for 2 months. And just like last season when you completely rebuilt the farm system by trading aces, yeah, maybe do it again. But I do understand they have a lot of young pitchers that they want to see what they have. So I guess we're going to see.
Oh, let's see what happens, because one thing I thought about, probably a lot of Mets fans probably don't agree with me about it. Why not take a flyer on Noah Syndergaard on a minor league deal compared to what you have right now?
I would say the answer would be because a combination of things. Syndergaard has not impressed in years. He just there are times where you see it, but he hasn't really impressed in years. And I don't think this matters, but I don't think he left on the best terms with the organization. It's a different organization than when he left. But he didn't leave on the best terms. And I think they really do think, based on his struggles the last couple of years, they have young arms that they like better.
Okay.
And if he was like the guy that killed me that they let go was Wheeler. I always wanted them to keep Wheeler. I loved Wheeler.
I'm eating crow for the past how many years about that? I said he wasn't worth that money.
A lot of people, that was, I think, the consensus. A lot of people thought, like, you don't pay Zach Wheeler that much. If we're talking Zach Wheeler, like, okay, but like Syndergaard, I think still coast a little bit in our minds is like, this is Thor. But yeah, not been Thor in a while, sadly.
Man. Harvey's
you asked a few episodes ago about the Knicks and DeMarcus Cousins. Syndergaard is like not quite DeMarcus Cousins, but like he's getting in that direction.
Yeah,
sad because he was fun to watch.
He was fun to watch. He showed some toughness on that pitching staff.
He told the Royals, "You got a problem with it? You can come find me 60 feet 6 inches."
Yes,
that was a nice moment. That was nice.
And I don't care what anybody tells me. If the Mets just got past Game 5 of that World Series, the Mets are winning in 7.
That was a special team that year. They would have had something going.
So
they did. Now let me ask you, because we're talking about a lot of Mets stuff, but like probably the biggest, other than how the team does, the biggest roster question this year is going to be what happens with Alonso. 12 months from now, do you want Pete Alonso, who's about 30, I think? Do you want Pete Alonso re-signed? Do you want Pete Alonso traded? Or do you want to wait and see how the season goes?
Putting my GM hat is I'm all for signing Pete Alonso. All for it, but it has to be in a contract that makes sense. Again, I always speak about equitable spending. You know what I'm saying? He is 30 years old. You're not going to give him a 10-year contract. That should not be even the process about him getting a 10-year contract. The way I would do it, the collective bargaining agreement allows it in the baseball bylaws of contract structure. I would I would give him a big contract, but front load it in the early years, where in the later years, you're not paying him as much. You're not going to take the hit.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So I would give him a 7-year deal with an opt-out after 3.
That might work.
How much? Boris?
Are you concerned? I would do it because I think not only is I think he's going to age well, because I don't like that there's a DH, but there is. And so it's not like he has to play like center field for the next 7 years. He's going to play first base and he's going to DH. So I think he can probably age into it better than most power slugger people do when they're mid-30s. I'm very curious to see what happens with it because I think he's really loved by the fans. I think he's far and away the most popular Met. He's very easy to root for, and the guy he's like arguably premier slugger. Like no one's hit more home runs in the major leagues since he came into the major leagues than he has, and I don't know, man. I think it's hard to lose. Like, I think sometimes you lose. It's not the same, but like when they lost Strawberry, even though if you remember they lost Strawberry, they got like Howard Johnson was hitting 30 home runs a year. They brought in Bonilla, but there's something in baseball, especially when you lose a monster cleanup hitter or just a monster RBI. There's something different about that hole in your lineup. Like when you come to play the Mets. Before the series begins, the other team is already very well aware and prepared for what are we going to do about this guy? And if it's the 7th inning of a close game and it's, man on second and Lindor draws a walk and Alonso comes up, you have to pitch to that man. Like you have to pitch to that man in that situation. So I think about losing Darryl. I think about when Piazza left. That worked out, still because they added Delgado. But I don't see another guy. I love JD Martinez as an addition. But you don't lose Alonso right now and have Lindor is awesome. He's not Alonso. Nimmo's really good. He's not Alonso. I love Francisco Alvarez. He's not Alonso.
Not yet,
and maybe not ever. Right. you don't get dudes like this. This guy is rare.
Right. And the funny part is the thing is though, we can't do the Mets don't make the same mistake we do with Reyes. We're not offering a contract.
That always bothered me. That felt at the time very Wilpons to me because they lost him to Toronto, and it's like
they lost to the Marlins.
Oh yes, he ended up in Toronto.
Yeah.
But you're right. Again, that's not a team the Mets should lose a good player to ever. So, the thing I read a very interesting an article someone wrote with an idea I hadn't thought of. And someone did this. I can't remember what team it was. It might have even been the Mets once. There's talk that because Alonso does like New York, if they struggle, there's the possibility that they could trade Alonso this season, but re-sign him in the offseason, and kind of have an understanding between the two. All right, we're not contending. Go have fun making a run with this other team. But when it's in the winter, we're going to extend you an offer, and then you get the picks and the player. But again, that only works if the Mets are out of it, and hopefully they're not.
We hope they're not out of it. I hope they're in it so they can now swing a trade for that big time starting number one pitcher. But the keys to the season my keys are: can Luis Severino give you a double digit wins this season and be healthy and be available for at least 30 starts?
Yeah.
This guy has
the talk from the people that have seen spring training so far is that Severino's looked really good. We'll see how much it lasts. The early in spring training, a lot of scouts from other teams liked the pickup because they felt like Severino's stuff still shows that there's something there. And to this point in spring training, he's looked really, really good. How much do you think it will make a difference between this year and last year if you hopefully have Edwin Diaz all season?
I think losing Diaz last season, the way they lost him, put a black cloud on.
I think that killed them. Yep. We don't talk about that because they didn't make a big signing, but they did add a guy who was the best closer by far 2 years ago, and even if he's not that guy, but he's still the guy who gets you 38 saves and strikes out everybody. That's huge. Where you don't have to have Adam Ottavino, closing games for you.
Right.
I think that's a big deal. I think another big move they made is adding Harrison Bader to the outfield. Their outfield defense is significantly improved because now when you have Bader and you got Marte and Nimmo in corner spots, that's a really good defense. That's a really good defensive outfield, and I think that's important for this team. He just hit a home run in spring training. I'm hoping he has a big bounce back year, mostly to help the Mets, also kind of to stick it to the Yankees and Cardinals because he used to play for them, and I want them to suffer.
I'm gonna change a little subject here. What happened to our guy Tommy Pham with all that trash of the Mets? He's still unsigned. I'm just saying.
I mean, there's a legitimate case being made arguing like part of if you've seen, there's been a lot of drama right now in the Major League Baseball Players Association. There was a big fight, kind of union infighting thing at a recent meeting where Tony Clark, former Met, former Yankee, who's the union president, basically a group of players is trying to force out Tony Clark's kind of co-leader because they have this other guy named Marino that they want to bring in. And oh God, this was just relating to what we were just talking about. What were we just talking about that led to this that led to me bringing up the union, Tony Clark. Tommy Pham. So there's a lot of talk among players and the evidence, and this has been growing for a couple of years, of collusion. And in the late 80s, I think it was 87, the owners were found guilty of collusion and had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. And that was 30-something years ago. And a lot of the players today, and I don't think they're wrong, it doesn't make sense that Blake Snell is a free agent a week before into training camp. In spring training. It doesn't make sense that JD Martinez, and this isn't just this year. We've seen in the last couple of years, like, how is that guy still available? How is that guy still available? So Tommy Pham, I think, is being victimized by when you collude against the top, by it's going to force all the because usually what happens is it's like an avalanche. Like you clear out the top guys, and then all the deals roll along because now everyone's ready to make moves. Well, if you collude against Snell, Montgomery, Martinez, there's a whole class of players who aren't getting opportunities either because they're waiting for that to finally shake. So I think you'll see Pham sign. What I don't understand or like for Pham is that he was great for the Mets last year. He was great for, was it in Arizona that he ended up with?
He went to Arizona.
He was great everywhere he went. And logically in the system, you're a player. You had an excellent season for two different teams, one of whom, so logically you should get a raise, maybe a longer contract, but certainly a raise. It doesn't make any sense that it's February and Tommy Pham is still sitting around here without a job. But so I think collusion's not easy to prove, but like it's I tend to side with the players. I never side with the owners, and I think they are being colluded against, and that's why Tommy Pham unfortunately doesn't have a job when he should.
Right. He could have the Melts. He could have the Melts right now to be a fourth outfielder, but his big mouth on what he said to the team is kind of disqualifies him from that.
I love Tommy. Tommy sometimes burns some bridges.
Yeah, it's not always good to do that. You gotta leave. You gotta leave with your mouth shut. Just move on because you never know when you have to cross that bridge again.
Wise words, Dom.
You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes when I go to AC, I have to cross the Verrazano Bridge. I gotta make sure that bridge is going to be available when I come back. Because you're gonna have a situation like you had in Baltimore. That's just real life. That's just real life.
It is. My dad, my whole childhood, I always remember him telling me in a principal's office or after some shit with a cop or whatever. Don't. You don't know what he would tell me. Don't burn bridges because you don't know when you need those people, and don't give them the rope to hang yourself with.
Right.
And I think that's a good lesson to have.
Definitely. Sometimes there's times there's most of them I don't follow my own advice, but yeah. So because I come with the shiny machete to cut that bridge down and burn it down.
You got a boat, you don't need a bridge.
Exactly. But now we got JD Martinez to protect Pete Alonso. I still think they need to keep Nemo at the leadoff spot for some reason. I just feel I like the way he works the pitches out in the first for leadoff spot. My question to you is, can Starlin Castro regain his 2022 form before his groin injury?
This is one of the biggest questions for me this year because I really love Starlin Marte. Always have. I loved him 2 years ago. And
Marte. Oh, my bad. Marte and Castro.
No, Starlin. Starlin's there, Starlin. I'm not, shocking spoiler to everyone. I'm not a pro athlete, but I had groin surgery around the same age that Marte is now. And I'm not in his body. I don't have the access to trainers that he does.
Mm-hmm.
but it took longer to recover for me than the doctors told me that it would.
Mm-hmm.
And with Marte, he's one of the reasons why I'm really happy that they got Bader, because I think if you have to rely on a 35-year-old coming off of groin surgery to play 150 games, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's less pressure on him because of the other moves that they made, and therefore I think of Marte now like, all right, maybe we don't need 150 games out of you, but like maybe now we get like 130 and we get some pinch hitting, and that Marte I think could be helpful and useful, and hopefully stay healthy. And if he does, he was a big part of that team 2 years ago, a very
Yes, he
big part
was.
of that team. So if he's good at that, if he's good, I mean, it's a very interesting. You mentioned Nimmo. Nimmo's a fascinating player to me. And like last year, Wade Boggs did this. There was 1 year in Wade Boggs' career, he suddenly started hitting home runs. He'd always been a good, real batting champ. And suddenly, out of nowhere, hit home runs. Brandon Nimmo, you think of him all these years as a guy who would draw a walk and get around. He hit 20. Last year they wanted him to start hitting with some pop, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to your point, if that's your leadoff hitter, that's a double threat, because you know what? If he can hit 20 home runs, awesome. That's a more dangerous hitter than the guy, but he can still draw a walk. He can still smack a single and take an extra base and hustle. He's always going to have dirt on his uniform. I agree with you. I think I like him leading off. Now, here's the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like Lindor ahead of Alonso? Do you think is there any chance you would move Alonso ahead of Lindor in the lineup?
Before JD Martinez, yes.
Yeah.
After JD Martinez, no.
Okay.
But I do feel that Lindor is best served in the number 2 slot, not the number 3.
Who's hitting 3 for you? Alonso?
Yeah.
So you've got
JD
Nimmo,
Cliff.
Lindor, Alonso, Martinez?
Yeah.
Okay. And then who's behind Martinez?
McNeill.
And then Alvarez?
Alvarez.
Okay, and then we still have Bader and how do you feel about a couple of things about third base?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Brett Beatty? He basically has the job now to win or lose.
Well, he's fortunate Ronnie Mauricio's out with the ACL.
I think so too. That guy was hitting show me something.
Ronnie Mauricio is the real deal.
Mm-hmm,
I don't care what anybody tells me. He's the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I'm going to bring up to you. I want to ask you. It could be a situation where the Mets could be looking, whether they're in the race or not, to trade Jeff McNeill.
I could see it. He's weird because there are qualities that may make him, beyond his obvious skills, there are things that make McNeill like a really appealing trade candidate. He plays multiple positions. Mm-hmm. He does not make a lot of money. One of the weird things with McNeill, he signed, he advanced kind of late in his career. So he never, you got to wait so long to get through arbitration and get your first deal. Like McNeill doesn't make a lot of money for a player his age who has had as much success as he has. So he's appealing in terms of his contract. He's appealing in terms of his versatility. He's a gamer. He can hit. And his skills seem like the kind of skills that are easier to when you plug a slugger sometimes into a new lineup, it can be kind of rocky because he's got to get used to should I be more aggressive, or does this team want me to take more pitches, and do I let the runner steal, or do I try to? But a guy like McNeill is just going to go up and play his game. He's going to take pitches. He's going to smack singles the opposite way. He's going to have a little more pop than you think. I think McNeil's probably the next veteran to go. If the farm system's working, that's going to open up something. And then I think McNeill can be a guy that all right, he's got value and he's probably going to go. Because if Beatty, Vientos, Mauricio, now Acuna, Gilbert, if they have some of the minor league, the young guys coming up that they do, you're going to have to clear roster spots.
Yeah.
And McNeill could easily be that guy.
I could see a situation where you trade McNeill and Beatty for a big-time corner outfielder.
that will depend a lot on how Beatty does, and hopefully that's big. I mean, every year somebody young does more than you think they will. It would be really helpful for the Mets if that was Brett Beatty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not just for what we're talking about, but I just think when we grew up and started watching the Mets, they had a long right before Hojo. They had a long it was a joke with the Mets organization. Like they never had a third baseman. They had something like 20, 30 basemen in like their first 20 years. And then suddenly we lived in this golden era where they had Ray Knight's the World Series MVP. Then they have Hojo.
Mm-hmm.
So they have Edgardo Alfonso. Then they have Robin Ventura. And then they have David Wright.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go through, that's an incredible for any franchise, but especially this one. And now I feel like I got to get third base locked down again. I don't know if it's Beatty. But I think the way Cohen and this team is, either Beatty wins the job this year, or next year there's a stud at third.
Mm-hmm. The stud could be on that disabled list right now. They're coming in.
Could be. That's another reason to think, if they like what they see from Mauricio rehabbing whenever he gets to it. It probably won't be till winter ball, because that's like a 12-month recovery process. But if they like what they see from him, or what would help Mauricio is just get something out of Beatty or Vantos this year, because then the organization is more likely to say we want to go young, so goodbye McNeill, and then when Mauricio's back, there's an opening. Very interested to see how that works out with those guys, because a lot of scouts from other teams are very hot. They say very good things about Vientos. They talk a lot about he's done everything in the minor leagues they've asked him to do. He's changed his approach kind of to what they want it to be. He shows great big league power. Like a lot of scouts talk highly about. You just got to get him at bat. The only thing he needs is at bats. That's it. And it looked like he was on track for that. And then suddenly, JD Martinez is under your tree.
JD Martinez, you can't
Which
pass
is not,
that.
A 5-6-time All-Star, 6-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger is not the worst thing. Who had 30 home runs and 100 RBI last year? I'll take that under my tree.
And he could play some first base in a pinch if he wanted to.
Yeah, he could. He can absolutely do that. Which again, when I give Pete a break one day, I give him a mental break or whatever. You still have him in the lineup. Just give the man a break for a day. I'm generally happy with. Happy is the wrong word, Dom. I can't say I'm happy, but I think if I just look at their offseason, I'm like, But if I look at their offseason and the trades last year, then I feel like they're in the right. Okay, good. Like they're in the right direction. I wasn't crazy about. I don't think there's anything they did this offseason that made me crazy. Martinez was probably the most like, oh, cool. But the guys that they picked up last year, especially Acuna and Gilbert, like I'm very, very, very excited about that. Very excited.
We could be good at an infield next season with Mauricio, from Lindor and Acuna, and hopefully Pete
Alonso,
and the first base. And in the outfield, we could be looking at Juan Soto, Bader, and Nemo.
So here's the great. We talked a little bit about this before the show. Like one of the great things about having an owner like Cohen's money is that you can think things you could never ever think before. Like I remember the offseason when the Mets got, I think it was James McCann. It was still, I think it was still Wilpon. And it was the kind of thing where you knew that like this is kind of about as big a move as they're going to make. Like if they make this move, they're not going to do other things. And the Wilpon Mets used to be great all the time about like, oh, we made an offer to this guy, but couldn't get him, and we were in on this guy. And you don't hear that with this guy because you don't need to hear it, because that's like someone who's always telling you like how hard they've tried in life. Like that's because they're not doing it. Right. If you're doing it, you don't need to be sitting around telling people what you're trying to do. You're just doing it. So Juan Soto is to me this incredible. Like we're literally living in the first time in human history where there is a person on the Yankees that is like the 25-year-old golden child of baseball. The Yankees just traded for him. Everyone knows the Yankees want to re-sign him. Everyone knows that stadium is custom built for this man. And I have seen more independent writers projecting the Mets to sign Soto next year than the Yankees. That makes no sense, but it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's great to be the.
That is such a different world. That's as different a world as the Knicks right now. To have the Mets in a pace of like, and the Mets aren't even really that great, but there's enough there that we're like, you know what? I like that guy that the Yankees want.
Mm-hmm.
That's like walking in like a rich person's house and being like, give me that shit.
Give me that
You've
shit.
never been able to do that. Now you can do that. That feels nice. And Juan Soto, we will talk about him another time.
But let's be honest, Matt. Juan Soto and the Mets have been flirting with each other back and forth for years.
And I think it's why I think it's a big deal, not necessarily that the Mets, they don't need to win the World Series or anything this year. They don't need to get to the World Series. But now that you have Stearns, you've got your guy, you've got your manager, they need to have a good season so that when they get to next offseason, it matters that Cohen has all this money. Because if you're not good, what happens is either, it doesn't matter how much money he has, I don't want to go there, or the only people who are going to want to come are total mercenaries who are only there because give me that contract and I'm going to cry and want out like in a year anyway. So for a lot of reasons beyond just we want to win games, the Mets need a season that changes the view.
Right.
But if they get one, watch out.
But Castro's contract falls off, I Bleav, after this season. Am I correct?
They have, let me check now. They have a number that may be coming off. Let me tell you right now. I got it. 24. Okay. Oh God, my computer doesn't seem to right. They have a lot of money, and it's not just the money to even players who are here, but also they got a ton of money to still Verlander, Scherzer, James McCann. They still owe money to also. So they have a lot. Here we go. They have a lot coming off. I'm looking right now at their salaries. Here we go. 2020. Oh, come on, Baseball Reference. Why are you doing this to me? All right, 1 second. There we go. 2025. I was looking at 2024. Here we go. 2024. So 2025 Mets have under contract Lindor. Marte is still under contract. But it's only here you have in terms of money. It's Sean Manaea has a player option for $13 million, which is not crazy. Edwin Diaz is on the books for 17. Senga's 14. Jeff McNeill is in the last year of his deal. That's I think 15. Nimmo 20, Marte around 20, and then Lindor, and that's it. There's they have right now for 2025. They are on the hook for $143 million in salary, which is way below all the tax levels. So like you're saying, a year from now, if they can have a lot of flexibility. And Soto might very well be available. If you ever needed a reason to root against the Yankees and you didn't have one already, this is the time.
Listen, something's off with that Yankee franchise, and I don't want to talk about Yankees on my podcast, but we have to in the interest of fairness, because they both play in New York.
I do.
I don't see the excitement on the Yankee side of the board at all.
I think how's not George? How's not George? You can't like we were saying how what a 180 it is to be a Met fan and like live in the reality. Well, it's just as much of a 180 to be a Yankee fan owned by a Steinbrenner and find yourself thinking like, why don't we spend money? Like, why don't we spend money the way the Yankees spend money? And that's because you see, and this transcends sports. You see this shit all the time. George was the one who built it. He fought, he struggled. It meant something to him. George Steinbrenner had a lot of problems. I'm not denying any of that. But just saying, you see a lot of times like first generation comes to this country, the immigrants who come to this country, and then the first generation that grows up here. There's a difference in terms of like the values of a from another place versus America. The comfort of growing up here versus having to make it work here. Hal Steinbrenner grew up the son of a billionaire. All he really his job is to make money.
Right.
So that's the way he works as an owner. George wasn't like that. But if you're a Yankee fan now, like that's the reality you're in. It's a weird reality, but that's the one that you're in. They're not only are they not the biggest spenders in baseball, they're not the biggest spenders in New York.
Right.
That has not been the case since we were kids.
Right. When Doubleday was driving that bus.
Yeah. That Wilpon antidote that we call the Doubleday.
Yes. The guy who said, I'm getting PRs no matter what the fuck you say.
Yes, he was. Yep. Thank you for that. He deserves. They should retire the name Doubleday on the wall on Citi Field just for that move.
They really should. He deserved to get retired on that. And before we switch over to basketball, but no, before we do that, talk about Tyler McGill's winning the fifth.
Yeah.
For the time being, until Kodai Sengai comes back, I think the Mets they're gonna run a little bit of hybrid of 6-man rotation because of
it has sounded like that. It worked last year. I think they feel like it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think especially now with Senga having the arm sensitivity, as long as Senga is in the plans, I think they're definitely sticking with 6-man. McGill has impressed a lot, especially. They feel like his splitter is coming along very nicely. They've liked how he's used it in spring training so far. I will admit I'm a fan, so I'm not saying this is fair. But I feel like I've been hearing for so many years, David Peterson, Tyler McGill, David Peterson, Tyler McGill, that like I'm tired of waiting. And I could be totally wrong and unfair. But my feeling right now on Tyler McGill is like, look, man, either do it or get out of here. Like I'm so tired. Peterson too, and they've both had runs of like, okay, like that's a back end of the rotation guy. Hopefully it is. He's definitely going to get a shot. I really hope he delivers because they have been. Now the big thing that we haven't mentioned that is kind of behind a lot of this talk, especially about McGill and some of the others, is that Cohen invested significant time and money in creating this pitching laboratory that the Mets are extremely proud of. Last off season, and they've been bringing their pitchers to it. It's supposed to analyze everything about how your body moves and how the ball moves, and they're very excited. McGill, and there was another pitcher, Sean Manaea, very high on this year, who have shown initial signs of like getting better spin on the ball, things that they developed in the pitching laboratory. So. We'll see. Cohen said he wanted to make a team like the Dodgers or the Rays, and one of the things that separates those teams is that they don't just pay money for great players. They develop really well because they have the top people in the field working on player development. If the Mets, you talked about basketball, the Knicks have been the Knicks did not turn things around because they got LeBron or they got KD. The Knicks bring in Julius Randle, and he becomes 3-time All-NBA. They draft Mitchell Robinson. He becomes all defensive. They bring in Jalen Brunson. They bring in DiVincenzo. They bring in McBride. They bring everyone they bring in. They develop really well because then when they hired Leon Rose, he made a point of, I'm bringing in this guy from Utah who specialized in player development. We're bringing in this person who we know. And you see them reaping the results that other people don't. Every offseason, the Knicks, listen to this statement. The Knicks are now the team most well known for signing players to deals that end up looking like absurd bargains. DiVincenzo makes less than the mid-level exception. Brunson doesn't even make $30 million a year. Mitch, his contract is already underpaid. The weirdness of being able to say the New York Knicks are probably the best organization right now at signing people cheap and then turning it into gold. That's how you change a culture. And you can change it both ways. The Yankees are changing the culture negatively. We got enough money. We're happy. Hopefully the Mets are going to be more like the Dodgers, where like we want to combine the best of everything. We have the money that we can do anything, but we don't want to be dependent on that. And that's where McGill, I think, is representative of the kind of player they're trying to turn around.
He's towing that Robert Gesellman line.
Which yes. If you remember also Steve Traxel. Yeah. Steve Traxel struggled. He was terrible when he started with the Mets. And they had to ask his permission to send him to the minors, and he agreed. Unlike Someone a couple years ago, was it someone on the Mets a couple years ago stunk and wouldn't go to the minors, but Traxel did, and he came back and it was a completely different pitcher. So hopefully, Robert Gazelman, give me more of that.
Got you. I want to ask you about Trevor Bauer, but I guess we could save that for another podcast because we got to get to some Knick talk.
I will talk Trevor Bauer whenever you want, but I will certainly enjoy talking the Knicks more.
Okay,
Trevor
got
Bauer,
you. Yes. Could get him on a cheap though.
Sometimes it's cheap for a reason.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So let's finish on the podcast off. A great podcast, of course, with Matthew from Jacobin Sports Show, Knicks Bleav Pod, and author Strickland. Talk about the Knicks now. We got like 9 games left of the regular season. There's some question marks we going into the playoffs. We just seen Dante DiFrancesco went crazy, got 40 points, 11 3-pointers, and our former Knick player was a little bit of a crybaby about that situation. Let's speak on that.
So Monty Williams, who has not had I'll be fair to Monty on a human level. Monty was in Phoenix having a really good time. He got fired probably unfairly. And then the Pistons did the highest paid coach in NBA history. You can pay, Chef Emerald to come to McDonald's and cook for you. But if you're giving him McDonald's ingredients, like you're going to get McDonald's food. So I think Monty's had a very frustrating season because they were talking about maybe competing for the play-in, and they're not doing that. And if you watch the game, one thing that became this is what was striking because I've seen this play out different ways. The game when Devin Booker got 70, I think, against the Celtics. Like his team was getting beat. Like his team was not contending. They were calling timeouts to run plays. Like it was obvious. Like this is bullshit. Like this isn't real. And the Celtics were pissed, and I thought had a right to be. In this game, this was not the Knicks doing anything. Like they were just running plays. And to tie it back to baseball, if we're playing baseball, Dom, and it's the 8th inning, and our team is down 12-0, and you're playing, let's say you're playing shortstop, right? I'm catcher. It's 12-0, and their runner on first tries to steal second. What are you going to do with the ball when I throw it to you?
I'm gonna try to tag the guy out.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to smack him in the face because it's 12-0.
Well, that's after I tag him out and I'm gonna snuff him. But get the out.
Because that's running up the score. But what the problem in baseball, this happened a couple years ago to Fernando Tatis Jr. I wrote about this for Jacobin magazine if anyone's ever interested in looking up the article. Tatis had a 3-0 count in a game that his team San Diego was killing Texas. And 3-0 count in the 8th, 7th, he swung and he hit like a grand slam. And when he got Chris Woodward, former Met, was the Rangers manager. And when Tatis got all the way around and got home, the Rangers were pissed. And Woodward was very vocal after the game. And I thought, tough. You can't tell the other team not to swing.
Right.
If you're that down, you got to forfeit. This isn't running. This isn't stealing bases. This isn't bunting. This isn't hit and running. This is literally just, I'm going to swing. DiVincenzo was not running. The Knicks were not running up the score. They weren't calling time to and the biggest indictment of Monty Williams is actually another ex-Knick. If you watch that game, when DiVincenzo was 1 away from the record, which was actually partially owned by Evan Fournier on the Pistons made it his job to not let DiVincenzo touch the ball or have any space to shoot. And credit to Fournier, who is not famous for his defense. DiVincenzo couldn't get a shot off because Fournier wasn't letting it happen. The second Monty pulled Fournier, now the Pistons had Malachi Flynn on DiVincenzo, and the very next possession, Flynn got caught on a screen. DiVincenzo got the first clean look he'd had in 10 minutes, and he hit the 3. Monty Williams, after the game, made a point of complaining and basically being accusing the Knicks of being unethical and running at the score. In this case, I think that's nothing but sour grapes. This wasn't Booker. This wasn't, in fact, and this came up in that game. Mike Breen brought this up, and he left out the best part of the story. I'm going to tell it to you because I wonder if you remember this. This was one of my favorite moments as a kid. It was the 1 year Don Nelson coached the Knicks. They played a game in Boston. If you remember, the Celtics used to have a guard named Dana Barros.
Yes.
He was an incredible three-point shooter. Barros had hit a three-pointer at the time in a record. It was 89 straight games. He had made a three, which was the record at the time. The Knicks came into Boston that day, and like he got nothing. They were just they killed him. The Knicks were good. The Celtics weren't. In the fourth quarter of a blowout, the Celtics kept trying to get Barros. Like it was clear their whole agenda was just get him a three, and he couldn't get one. At the very end of the game, the Celtics coach ML Carr called timeout to draw up a play for Barros to get one more shot, and you could see the Knicks were like hot. Like, this game is done. It has been done. You're calling timeout. So Don Nelson put Anthony Mason on Dana Barros. So when Barros got the ball, there was literally nothing he couldn't get a shot off because Dana Barros was about 6'1", and Anthony Mason was a little bigger than that and a pretty tough, strong dude. When the game ended, the Celtics coach was so pissed at Don Nelson, he threw the basketball at the back of his head. That's how it was. So we talk about running up the score. Like, people get in their feelings, and I get it, and I understand not wanting to get the score run up, but this was not that. This was just DiVincenzo having an unconscious evening against one of the worst teams I've seen in a while, and that's what Monty's pissed about.
Like Josh Hart responded to him too, said
he did.
Why don't you play some defense?
No one said you guys can, and that's the thing. Fournier was committed. I'm not letting this guy get my record. So it can be done. There are people who can defend on your team. That's not the next problem.
You're right. Ironically, the worst Knicks defensive player in Knicks history was actually playing defense from keeping somebody else from getting his record.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was amazing to watch. I was like, Fournier looked like Scottie Pippen chasing fucking around.
It makes you wonder where was that when he was playing with Tom Thibodeau.
You would have gotten those minutes. You would have lost your job to Quentin Grimes if you moved around like that.
Exactly. 2 things before I let you go, Max. I know you want to catch that Knick game. I'm going to probably catch some of it too myself.
Breaking news for those listening, if you're listening live, especially, or whenever you hear this, but make sure you catch the game because Mitchell Robinson has been activated for tonight's game in Toronto.
Ding, 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 ding.
Right.
Let's get it.
So 2 things. Tell me.
2 things. OG Anunoby, 9 games left. Concerning. We spoke about before we started the podcast. The elbow situation is concerning. The last time a team that he played on had a big run in the playoffs, he was not playing.
No, he was. I mean, if you look at Anunoby's history, his numbers, the only thing that stands out as a problem is he just doesn't. He gets hurt a lot. What's weird about this injury, and for me concerning, is not. The Knicks are probably still the least open organization with the media in the league. The Knicks make it their point to be antagonistic with the media. And James Dolan this year publicly said, if you remember, that he was involved the Knicks are involved in a lawsuit with Toronto over accusations that an employee stole confidential Knick information when he was hired by the Raptors. And so there's a whole case going on. And Dolan has said publicly in a statement that he feels he doesn't think he can get a fair shake from Adam Silver. He thinks the league is like against him. So how this ties into OG. If you don't like to talk openly at all to begin with, and you believe that the league is like stacked against you to begin with, then probably you're not going to say anything about OG because you're like, forget the press, screw the press. And competitively, there's no advantage to telling the rest of the league when your guy is going to be back or not be back if you don't have to. Like, there's no advantage to that. Hockey makes a whole thing out of upper body injury, so you don't know what's actually going on. So my concern with OG is I feel like the instant he came back and started playing in his very first game in the fourth quarter, he gestured and looked. He was holding his elbow like he wasn't comfortable. And I remember in that game he had like 3 or 4 dunks because I had just joked, it was to you or to somebody. I had just joked and found out it was true that OG has more dunks this year with the Knicks than RJ did, even though OG's only been here like 15 games and RJ was here. But I remember in that first game, OG had like 3 or 4 dunks, and I remember thinking like, it's got to put a little work on your elbow, like to be, and he's. So my concern is just, I don't trust the Knicks to tell me the truth when they don't have to, and just like with Randall, we talked about this a little bit before. If you're going to bring OG back, there's 1, 2. There's about 2.5 weeks left in the regular season. This is around the time you'd be bringing him back to make sure he gets ready for the playoffs. So the longer we get towards 2 weeks from now, where you haven't seen Randall or OG, now the question is, okay, are they thinking? I don't know. That's my concern with OG, is that when everyone is, and the Knicks always do this, every injury they're like, oh, it's actually it's not it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that okay, but he still isn't back.
Right.
So you can't keep telling me it's not that bad and he's still not back.
Exactly.
That concerns me, because this team is on a different level when that man is playing 35 minutes.
Oh, big time.
Different level.
They're top 5 team in the NBA when he's playing.
Yep, absolutely.
Him and Randall, it just creates that bit big of a difference, and that's why we need him on the floor. We don't want him. We don't want him on the bench in street clothes. We want him in uniform playing.
The people at the Strickland that I work with, I started calling him, PTO means pay time off. So now they call him PTOG because he's never out there. But I love that man. I got no beef with him. It's not his fault he got hurt. I trust he's doing everything he can to get back. I hope he's there, because especially if they get like Milwaukee or Boston, you have him to throw at Antetokounmpo or Brown or Tatum. That's a game changer.
That helps immensely. So definitely, Matt, like I said, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Definitely,
always my pleasure.
We have to get together again for the pre-NBA
2 weeks
show. 2 weeks.
Close. And I'll tell you what, Dom, the Rangers got 100 points. You ever want to talk New York Rangers?
Listen, I'll let you lead that podcast. So all you want, man, is go ahead, man. I'm gonna try to keep up.
I'll be happy to talk. And in any good MSG team, I'll be happy to talk with you.
Definitely. So on that note, I want to create a big announcement for you, everyone here on the True Players Podcast. I did mention on the first game of the doubleheader that I have a big announcement. The True Players Podcast, starting in mid-April, will be officially be seen. Every new episode will be seen on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m.
Nice.
Officially. So there's gonna be some nights there are gonna be some nights that are not gonna be shown. I'll let you guys know in advance. But we have settled on a date. Myself, Joey G, Matthew as well, also a key contributor to the podcast. We're gonna be on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. If it's earlier than that, we will let you guys know. Just expect some double header podcast episodes on that day as well. So definitely, like I said, guys, it's a pleasure. You can listen to me on Anchor, soon to be back on Spreaker, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeart Radio, TuneIn Radio, Amazon Music. You can watch your video on YouTube, Patreon, and soon, hopefully, I'll be on Vimeo as well. So we're working on some big things here with the True Players Podcast.
Good deal, Dom.
Yeah, thank you. We got to work hard. We got to take this to the next level, hopefully I have this New York Met player to join me on the podcast.
I can tell you for a fact, your old Little League coach, Coach Miranda,
yes,
called me immediately when he saw that photo and told me, "You tell Dom, I'll just sit and listen. But if he gets that, he said call me." So the people are waiting, Dom. The people are excited. I'm gonna try to reach out. I haven't reached out to Daryl, but someone else from the 86 team we're working on right now. All right. That's all good. I'm just gotta get over my shyness of reaching out and talk to Daryl, see what he thinks. But it's gonna be a process. As long as it's not Lenny Dykstra, I think you got nothing to worry about. No. It's gonna be our favorite players from that team. All right. And Joey Chu will be back with us next week soon. Also, guys, WrestleMania is coming up soon, so I would love to do a podcast pre-WrestleMania. Probably do something on Saturday in regards to that. There you go. In night one, we'll see what happens. On that note, Matthew, any last words? Just check out. We had a piece drop today at the Strickland, looking at the Knicks possible. It's a 3-part series looking at who they might play in the playoffs. So part 1 came out a couple of weeks ago, looking at the lower teams like Philly, Indiana, Chicago, Atlanta. This part 2 that just dropped today looks at Miami, Orlando, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. I will also have a piece coming out in a couple days looking at how Tom Thibodeau's style of offense with the Knicks is very similar to Pep Guardiola's style of offense for Manchester City. Really interesting parallels between two very different teams and two very different sports. But the principle, if you remember the old Bill Parcells Giants, it's basically ball control. But you think of ball control in football as a very smash mouth, and I think the Knicks play that way a little bit. But Man City is like the best team in the world, and it's really interesting to me to look at how the Knicks have turned a team that isn't a great shooting team. Like, they're okay, but they're not Golden State, they're not the Celtics. But just by rebounding and having the ball as much as they do, they just wear teams down. So keep a lookout if you want for that at the Strickland, thestrick.land. And then, as I said earlier, 100th episode of Jacobin Sports Show coming up soon. So look out for that too.
Can't wait for that. On that note, everybody, thanks for joining us on Doubleheader today. We'll see you next week. I'm not going to say Wednesday, but next week. All right? All right, people. Take care. Have a blessed night. Peace.